Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, June 5th meeting of Kubernetes SIG service catalog. Since we have a couple new faces, I wonder if you folks would like a chance to introduce yourselves for those that might be watching later on YouTube or have snuck in since you already introduced yourselves before we started recording.
Hi, I'm Sunil, and I joined Kubernetes team at Google a month ago, and I'll be working on taking pod presets from alpha to beta. So that's my first project, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Walter. I've been on the Kubernetes team at Google for a few months now. I'm part of the API machinery team, and I've been working on trying to fix up some of the aggregator oddities so that it'll function in a better way for the service catalog.
Well, that is truly appreciated. Thank you, gentlemen, and welcome. The person with the nick BJUNG.
Oh, okay. That's me.
Okay.
My name's Bernd. I'm from VMware and just started building something similar to Service Catalog, and then discovered that something like Service Catalog existed. And so just trying to come up to speed and see what you guys are working on.
I'm glad that you could evaluate this project as being something like Service Catalog. That tells me we're moving in the right direction. So glad to have you. Sorry, you said your name was Brent?
Bernd.
Barrett, okay. All right. Well,
Barrett,
welcome, Barrett.
Yeah, Barrett, quick question for you. With you being from VMware, what's your relationship to Pivotal, if at all?
With Pivotal?
Yeah.
I mean, we know about each other.
Okay. I'm just curious because obviously our service catalog is inspired from this Cloud Foundry Service Broker API. So I was wondering,
Exactly.
some kind of connection there. But okay, if you're not involved with Cloud Foundry at all, then it makes perfect sense that you would be in the path that you're on. Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so not first on the agenda, but first in my mind and soon to be first on the agenda is...
Hey, Paul, we've got another new face.
All right, new face alert. Does the person with the last new face want to introduce themselves?
So you're talking about me, Aaron?
Yes. Yes.
I did attend last time, but you weren't here, Paul. So I'm Chris Kroll. I'm taking over for Wes as the product manager from Google.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Glad to have you on.
Good to meet you.
So first up, Simon has been prototyping some kubectl extensions for Service Catalog. For those that may not already be aware of what that means, there was a proposal merged recently to allow folks to implement basically extensions in the form of like macro commands. So you won't be able to change the behavior of get or describe in this manner, but you can create new subcommands for kubectl via a plugin mechanism similar to how Git plugins are created. And Simon has been working on a set of these extensions for Service Catalog to help the CLI experience be more useful for creating catalog resources. So Simon, you should be able to go ahead and share your screen. You've got the floor. Why don't you show us the work that you've been doing?
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, do you guys see the screen? It should be a terminal.
Do you mind making the text a little bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, I do see it, but it's probably going to be hard for people on the internet to read at the current size.
And us old folks, yeah.
Maybe
How's it now? How's it now?
A little bit more.
More. Okay. Good?
Yep, that works.
I think it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to be showing is actually we have a PR open of the kubectl plugins for service catalog. Currently, when we want to do any operations on the service catalog, we will have to go through the stock kubectl, where you have to set the, if you have gone through the walkthrough of our repo, you will see that you have to set the context, and then you will have to make commands through the context over kubectl in order to talk to our API server. With the plugin right now, you no longer have to do it. And currently, I have created 3 prototype commands. The first one is to create a create service broker, which it will create an instance of the broker. And the second one is to create service. I think I changed the name called create service instance, just to not be confusing. Okay, so the second one is create service instance, and that will provision a new service instance. I forgot what's the terminology for that. Is that right? Service instance?
Yep, service instance.
Yep, that's right. And provision is also right.
Yeah, okay. And the last one is to bind service, which will bind the broker instance and the service instance you just provision together to a namespace. So in order to use these plugins, there's 2 things you have to set. So how the plugin command works is, the first thing you have to do is to export environment variable so that the kubectl will find where your plugins directory is. So right now, we're going to do that. So right now, I'm going to point the environment variable to where the plugin's at. It's going to be in plugins command kubectl, and in there, there's the 3 commands. And let me do this command. I will show you what's in there. So in this directory, there's 3 subdirectories. And so let's look at one of these. So in, for example, create service instance, in there, there's the there's a binary which the kubectl is going to invoke, and the source code. And inside, let me show you how this works. So plugin.yaml is where the magic is. It points kubectl, so kubectl is going to run into here and look for plugin.yaml, and then in here you just basically tell kubectl how to invoke the command that you want. So in here we just want to run this binary. So let me show you how this works. So now we have set the environment variable, and in order to invoke our commands, kubectl, and currently, in order to run any plugins, you will have to use the plugin command, and hopefully that's going to go away soon. I think there's a new PR being worked on to eliminate the plugin command keyword. So right now, we have, I have deployed the service catalog on my Minikube, and also the broker. So let me show you. Oh, this doesn't work here. So kube get pods. So in my catalog, I have the API server and control manager deployed. And in the namespace broker, I have my broker deployed. So right now I'm ready to run the create broker command to create a broker instance. So plugin, create broker, service broker, create service broker. And if you don't know how to use it, like you can pretty much just type in the command and then, oh, is this, did I set the export correctly? That should be right. Give me a second, real fast. Let me make sure that, oh, because I haven't compile the binary for the first one. So the create service broker doesn't have the binary file created, so I just gonna have to go build it. And if you want to try out the PR, this is what you're gonna have to do. I have built the binary for the other two commands, but not this one. So once it's built, you'll probably take like 10, 20 seconds or so. Once it's built, I can do that command again. kubectl plugin, create service broker. And if you just invoke the command as it is, it's going to show you an error. And because the usage goes like this, the broker name, the URL, the broker name and the broker URL. So I have a copy and paste, so I don't type it. So in our case, I pretty much just going to go through our walkthrough, but instead of using the core kubectl, I'm going to use the command plugins. So the first one, broker name will be UPS broker, and then the URL to access the broker will be this. So you run that, and it's going to create a broker, and then it's going to show you the broker name, and we didn't specify namespace, so it didn't return us one, and it shows you what's being created. So the next step, what we want to do is to create a service instance so we can bind it to the service. So the second command will be plugin create service instance, and the usage will be the first argument is service class name, and then the plain name, the instance name, and the namespace you want it to be created into. Okay, so I copy and paste a command. So the service instance name, the plain name will be default, and then the broker instance name is UPS instance, and the namespace is going to be in test namespace. So I'm going to run that, and you should create a service instance in that namespace. So in this command, the first thing it does is to look up, make sure the namespace exists, and in our case it doesn't. So I'm going to have to create namespace, and I want it to be called test ns. I'll create that, and then I'm going to run the command again. And this time should be successful. So first look up the namespace, it's okay, and then it's going to create it, and then it's going to return information of what's being created to you. Okay, that's the second command. And the third last command will be to bind them together, the broker and the service instance together. So plugin, I think bind service. And the usage for this is you need the instance name and the binding name and the namespace it needs to be in. So here's the command. This is the instance we created earlier, and this is what we want the binding to be called, and this is the namespace the broker service is going to be in. We run that. Oh, I already have that existed. So let me delete the old one. So currently we don't have any plugin delete command, so I'm going to have to go through kubectl context. I set the context, which is service catalog. So I'm going to delete bindings, UPS binding, and then I can create it again. Okay, so this is the bind service command, run that, and now it's successful. You look at the namespace and you create it, and then it's going to tell us what's the name of the binding and then a secret name. Currently, the secret name is going to default to whatever the binding name is. And there it is. I think that's pretty much to it. Any comment or questions?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Just one on the experience side. So traditionally with all the kube control commands, you don't pass namespace as an argument. It's either pulled from context or as a flag. Is that something that we can't do because of plugin architecture, or just hasn't been done yet?
You're correct. Like the plugin architecture currently does not support optional flags. So what we can do is we can do it as an optional argument, but I'm not doing that just because I know a PR is being worked on for optional flags. So I'm just going to wait for that to come. And when that drop, we can switch over to use that.
By optional, do you mean you have to specify a command line option?
Yes.
Okay.
And since everything is an argument, we can only support one optional argument. With more than one, we don't know which one is optional or not.
So,
but that limitation is going to go away when the flag's going to drop. So we just probably best wait for that.
So one of the things that I think is interesting is, and good demo, Simon. So in this particular case, what he showed is binding the secret that gets created from the binding into the namespace, which is sort of okay. One thing I'd like us to discuss at some point, and I don't know whether this is necessarily before or after beta, but I do want to discuss the option of changing it so that you can bind to not just a namespace, but to a quote application, right? So you could say, for example, in place of the word namespace there, you could say deployment/deployment name, replica set / replica set name. That way we can actually bind to a particular application in there and have it do the pod preset stuff under the covers automatically. But we can discuss that later.
Yeah, I've had similar thoughts, and definitely good demo, Simon. So the only thing that I'll call out is that I think it would be great if you could also do this demo for SIG CLI, and we could get some feedback about like naming of the like subcommands and stuff like that from the folks who spend a lot of time thinking about those things as pertains to CLI, so that we're operating in good territory when it comes to those kind of conventional things. Mm-hmm. And then this is not feedback about your demo, but I think that in the SIG that we should discuss how we will publish these things and how we will get people to install them on their systems.
I kind of thought about that. There's like different ways to do it, but it's probably easy if they just curl sh or some bash command file, and then you will set the environment variable for them and install this binary into a certain place for them. That will be one command, but there's certainly a lot of other ways to do it.
Yeah, so I think that this is probably another area where I would be willing to bet a single dollar that Service Catalog is going to be the head of the spear about like, what do you do when you have an extension to Kubernetes which has its own kubectl plugins that we need to publish, and what's the right conventional way to do it? Because you're right, there's tons of different options, so that might also be worth talking about in SIG CLI.
Yeah, and not only getting the SIG CLI to talk about, as you said, Paul, the format of the commands on the command line, not only just the install process, but potentially where to download these things from. Because it'd be really nice if there were pre-built versions of these binaries already available for people to easily download.
Yeah. That's not too big of an issue, really, because we can put up, like Simon said, we can cross-compile these inside of Travis. We can upload them to a bucket, whatever, Google Cloud Storage, etc.
No, I'm not.
Put a curl bash script in there.
I have no problem with that, Aaron. My concern is I think Kubernetes needs to define a place for these things, not just every single SIG define their own place.
Yeah,
I would like us to not wait for that.
I think we need, just like they did with Helm recently, right, a couple months back, they gave a place where you could go and you could find Helm charts. Like plugins should have a home. People can go and look for Kube plugins.
Yeah, and we can be the people to define it. I would like us not to wait for Kubernetes because this is going to take a long time compared to.
Agreed. Yeah, we can have someplace temporary under Service Catalog, but in the meantime, we should have the discussions with SIG CLI and get them to define a place that we'll eventually migrate to. Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
Another good way to good things to suggest to SIG CLI is maybe since we're having thoughts on how people would discover this or how people would download this, maybe they can support a plugin repository where people can discover plugin commands right from the kubectl, right? So they just download right from kubectl without leaving the context at all.
Exactly.
I know CFCLI is doing that, and there's something we can consider.
Yeah, the Cloud Foundry user experience for downloading plugins is actually very nice. And if we can mimic that as much as possible, I think that'd be really great for the end user.
What do they do?
But basically, as Simon said, from the CF command line, you can actually get the list of plugins, you can download a plugin, you can upgrade a plugin, and you never have to do curl commands manually. It just downloads the right version, installs the right directory. It's just magic under the covers.
Yeah, I would echo you, Jessica. I mean, the Helm experience for this is also super good.
So I just type in the command for Cloud Foundry. This is a list of all the plugins like the Cloud Foundry community maintains. So they have a repository, and you can have a multiple repository. So one for Garage, one from the community. Like this is how they do it, and you can just download from here.
Cool. So Simon, will you have a takeaway to get this demo then onto the next SIG CLI agenda?
Sure, yeah.
So that you can show it? And once you do that, will you perhaps also as a takeaway send an email to the Google group and put something into chat so that folks know? So yeah. we can go and watch, see what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yep.
All right. Good demo.
Just to add to that, I'm also part of the SIG CLI team here. So I will also have an internal discussion heads up to the team here.
Awesome.
All right. Okay, so next up, Vile is going to share some information about the O.10 release. That was from last Wednesday.
Actually, 009, but yes.
Oh, my bad.
No, it's hard with your future travels. It's hard to remember what all universe you're in. Anyway, so we released on Wednesday last week, and it was the 009, and the biggest things that we're in that one are adding a support in alpha for the service brokers schema support. That was added in, so that's in alpha. We also added the controller now blocks the asynchronous requests going to brokers, so that there's only one outstanding one as per current spec. Then there's some validation of service classes, making sure that they are conforming. So, for example, must have a plan. Also, there was a lot of refactoring done between 08 and 09 for the controller. So the controller .go file had grown quite unwieldy. So the first attempt to kind of clean that up was done to refactor it into separate files. And last week, the second refactoring was done to break the unit tests in the corresponding files. So that makes it much easier, and hopefully will make merging easier as well. And then there was a lot of cleanup done to make the broker client more conformant, mainly issues like conforming the spec. When spec says, hey, you should be passing me a query parameter, in some cases we were stuffing that into a body and vice versa. So that work was done for this release. And the other little bit more on that. So those are the big ones. There's others there as well. Those are the big ones. One thing is Paul, and I have been chatting about this quite a bit about the broker client, whether it really belongs into the service catalog or if it should be its own repo. And Paul has put out, I think you put a link to it in the chat, Paul. But anyways,
yeah, I'm going to put a link to it in there.
Yeah, so there's another repo where it might make more sense to have if it's part of the spec. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a note to talk about that one after this, and I think there was one more kind of big thing, which is audit support merged last week.
Okay. And there you have it.
Yeah, so one second, I'm getting my getting the link to this thing into the document too. On the note that VLA made that he and I've talked a little bit about this with Doug and Aaron too, and we talked about it as a group quite a while ago, but I think that it would be amazing if there was like an official open service broker client for Go, so that people building integrations with this API and platforms that are written in Go do not have to implement it themselves. There's some slight degree of self-interest there, since we all happen to be working on exactly that with Kubernetes, and obviously Kubernetes is written in Go. In my copious spare time, in between jet setting around and all of the photo shoots for the cover of Time magazine and so forth that I routinely have to do, I decided as a pet project of mine to build a Golang client for Open Service Broker, and part of that was as an exercise to get me to force myself to learn inside and out the spec, which I have found a couple places where I didn't have the right knowledge, which was kind of frustrating to me as a really pedantic nerd, not to know the right things. So there was that motivation, and I also have noticed that our client that we use in the catalog incubator repo is not very well tested. So my two goals were to ensure that it implements the spec perfectly, and also is really comprehensively tested as far as what request body, what request parameters does it send, does it deal correctly with malformed responses, does it deal correctly with certain conventional error codes and stuff like that that the broker can provide. So I put a link to that in the chat. I took some care in also designing this to be a drop-in replacement to a great degree for the one that we have in the repo, regarding like the creation function that we use to avoid, or well, to allow ourselves to differentiate the actual implementation of the client that we create. So I will make an issue and probably take some time this week to draft a pull request that demonstrates that it's not supremely intrusive to change the client out. But what I think would be great is if we could donate this to Open Service Broker API and just have that be the official client, and as part of the process for Open Service Broker API, make sure that we update that thing. And likewise, I think the Cloud Foundry stuff is implemented mostly in Ruby. Doug or someone else that knows about Cloud Foundry, is that accurate?
Yeah, but I mean, some of it maybe switch over to Go, but I have a bigger question for you here. If they decide to push back, because they have in the past, to be perfectly honest, where do you want this to live? If it can't go there, are you comfortable with it? If it can't go there,
I'd be totally fine rehoming it in Kubernetes Incubator.
Okay, cool.
Like I have no desire to keep my GitHub name in the URL to that thing. I mostly just was working on this between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. So that made sense as a place to start it.
Okay, that's fine. They pushed back before when we tried to do a reference implementation of the spec, and so I suspect they'll push back again on this if they're consistent.
Yeah, so I actually had a conversation with Shannon, trying to, on a somewhat related note, of trying to find if they have like a reference implementation of a broker that they use to test Cloud Foundry with, and it turns out that they do. and he at least seemed receptive to the idea of that being split out into a different repo. So we'll see if we get some traction with them. If we don't, I'm happy to put it anywhere it makes sense.
Yeah, okay, cool.
If you load that URL, I have coveralls working on that repo, and I think that we're at like 90% test coverage in it, which is about what you can get to without testing dumb things that are like factory methods that have almost no logic and stuff like that. So I'd be really happy to get any feedback that folks have. I'm probably going to make a pull request to this in the next couple days to put the schema support into this repo. But it already supports the alpha context feature and has flags that allow you to differentiate when you create the client what version of the API it should send and whether you should enable alpha features or not. So it's written with some of our concerns in mind about like X broker doesn't work correctly when alpha is turned on, or X broker is pinned to this version. So did a little bit of thinking ahead trying to design for that. So moving on, the next thing on the agenda is status of beta. Now, I don't think that we have, it's been a couple weeks since I think we talked about this in detail. So just to recap for everybody, Kubernetes APIs have 3 different degrees of, 3 different like semantic categories that they break it down into regarding level of support. So an alpha API is like, this could change at any time, and it might be deleted, and no matter what happens, your data definitely won't be migrated when it goes to beta. Beta means, and by the way, since we do have an API machinery expert in the room, do feel free to tell me when I have misspoken or outright said something completely incorrect. But beta means that there may be bugs, but it's a higher level of togetherness, so to speak, than alpha, in the sense that if breaking changes are made to a beta API, you will get a new beta version and get your data migrated to the new beta version. And then there's GA, which is like, we aren't going to make any backward incompatible changes to it, and we have to live with it, so to speak, forever until we have a new GA version. At least I think that's it. But for all intents and purposes, we have to live with any GA API that we release for the foreseeable future. So as far as that pertains to us, I'm sure everybody dialed into this call probably knows this already, but we'll repeat it just for anybody that doesn't and anybody watching on the internet, that our API surface for Service Catalog is alpha right now, and we need to decide what our decision plane is for when we think the API is ready to go to beta. I will note also for the API machinery oriented people in the room that I realized today that I don't think that there is a list of things that are required to be able to say that a Kubernetes API is beta, which we might want to do some thought about, because there are, there are a number of different good practices and expectations that users have about how Kubernetes APIs behave. For example, if you have a namespace resource, the expectation is that those things are cleaned up when the namespace is deleted. So presumably that is a requirement for an API being GA. The question is, which of those things are required to say that an API is beta? And I know that we recently took, in the Kubernetes community, recently have taken APIs to beta, for example, stateful set, But I do not think that as part of the exercise of doing this for other APIs, that we actually sat down and thought in a vacuum, which of these things to take API group X or Y to beta are really generic requirements about generally what does an API need for us to consider it beta from a operational standpoint, kube good practice standpoint, et cetera. So we're going to have, we have a time set up for Wednesday to talk, to kind of hash out what we think our decision plane is for going to beta. I do not think that we're going to have the luxury of waiting for the larger community to go to beta. So what I would like to do for me personally before then is get in touch with some of the folks that were owners of these different API groups that have recently gone to beta and see if we can get some information about what kind of decisions form their decision plane, or rather what kind of criteria formed their decision plane that they used, so that we can try to at least follow along what has been done, while at the same time we can perhaps participate and help lead the discussion about there should be something in the Kubernetes community repo that like clearly articulates the requirements for things being beta versus GA. So I will put the coordinates for that meeting where we talk amongst folks in the SIG into chat and so forth, so we can all listen in. And that's essentially what I had to say about that. We've got about 20 minutes left, but we could share ideas for what we think a good decision plane is, and perhaps get folks thinking in advance of Wednesday, if anybody would like to do that, or if there are any other things that people want to discuss while we're convened.
So, Paul, one of the things I think you took an action item to do was to try to get somebody from, I can't remember what SIG it's called, but somebody who has knowledge about how APIs are supposed to be designed, right? Whether our resource model looks right or not, and ask them to give our stuff a look over. Do you ever get a chance to do that?
I have not had a chance to do that. I am crossing my fingers and hoping that I can do that before Wednesday.
Okay, cool.
It actually wasn't a SIG. It was like I was going to try to get time with one of the owners of Kubernetes, like someone in the top level owners file, to sit down and do that with me.
Okay.
But I haven't had time yet.
That works. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I tell you what, we have 19 minutes left on the agenda here. If anybody would like to share anything with the group or ask questions, we have some time now. Okay, well, I'm hearing that we're done. So I am going to end the meeting, and I thank you all for attending. Thanks for watching on YouTube, and we will see you Wednesday or see you next week. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.